You join swear affirm that you will well and truly try the issue between the state of Florida and the defendant and render a true verdict according to the law and the evidence. And I do.
I do. All right, thank you all. Please be seated. All right, folks, these are some preliminary instructions I have to read to you. I have to read to them into the record, but you all will read along with me. Just like I gave you a copy of the Beyond Reasonable Doubt instruction, I think we all absorb better once we read, follow, and also hear. There's also note-taking opportunities, so I'm going to start with page 1 of the preliminary instructions. Members of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of the state of Florida versus Daisy. This is a criminal case. The defendant is charged with second-degree murder with a weapon, the weapon being a firearm. The definition of the crime charged will be explained to you later. You must decide this case based on the evidence presented and the law that I give you. Evidence consists of the sworn testimony of witnesses, exhibits submitted into evidence, and anything else that I tell you to consider as evidence. The state's charging document, which is called information, is not evidence and is not to be considered by you as any proof of guilt. It is my responsibility to explain the law to you. It is your solemn responsibility to determine if the state proved its accusation beyond a reasonable doubt against the defendant in accordance with the law that I provide to you. Thus, the province of the jury and the province of the court are well defined, and they do not overlap. This is one of the fundamental principles of our system of justice. Before proceeding further, it would be helpful if you understand how a trial is conducted. At the beginning of the trial, the attorneys will have an opportunity, if they wish, to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorney the chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. What the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not to consider it as such. Following the opening statement, witnesses will be called to testify under oath. They will be examined and cross-examined by the attorneys. Documents and other exhibits may be introduced as evidence. After the evidence has been presented, the court will give you instructions on the law. The attorneys will then have the opportunity to make their closing arguments. Following the closing arguments by the attorneys, the court will conclude with the final instructions. After the final instructions are given, the officer will be released and you will retire from the jury. You do not form a definite or fixed opinion on the merits of the case until you have heard all the evidence, the arguments of the lawyers, and the instructions on the law that I give you. Until that time, you should not discuss the case among yourselves. Your verdict must be solely based on the evidence or lack of evidence and the law. Jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence presented in the courtroom. Jurors must not conduct any investigation on their own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. You may not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. If you investigate, research, and make any inquiries on your own, I have no way to make sure that the information you obtain is proper for the case. The parties, likewise, have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of what you find. This is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it, and to present argument with respect to that evidence. Any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having that opportunity our judicial system promises. You are also not permitted to communicate about this case with anyone, including your spouse, family members, friends, neighbors, and even your fellow jurors. No communication includes no in-person, telephonic, or electronic communication, such as emailing, text messaging, posting information on social media or a website, or any other form of communication. During the trial, the court may take recesses, and you will be permitted to separate and go about your personal affairs. It is important to remember that the prohibition on communicating about this case applies during these recesses, whether you are in the courthouse or elsewhere. If at any time you find yourself in a situation where others are discussing the case in your presence, leave that situation at once and immediately report the matter to the bailiff, who will advise you. All cell phones, computers, tablets, or other types of electronic devices must be turned off while you are in the courtroom. Turned off means the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in the silent or vibrating mode. You may use these devices during recesses, but even then you may not use your cell phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in the case. Do not take photographs, videos, recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or of your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your cell phone or electronic device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones, computers, or other electronic devices. This is during deliberations. If someone needs to contact you in an emergency, the court can receive messages and deliver them to you without delay. A contact phone number will be provided to you. Any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result that would require the entire trial process to start with. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If you violate these rules, you may be held in contempt of court and face sanctions such as serving time in jail, paying a fine, or both. In every criminal proceeding, the defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is the duty of the defendant to prove her innocence. From the exercise of the defendant's right to remain silent, the jury is not permitted to draw any inference of guilt. And the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence your verdict in any manner whatsoever. The attorneys are trained in the rules of evidence and trial procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it is made. Likewise, when an objection is sustained or upheld by me, you must not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, nor what a witness might have said had the witness been permitted to answer. During the trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys out of your hearing to discuss matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when such a conference may be required or how long it will last. When such conferences occur, they will be conducted to consume as little of time as necessary for a fair and orderly trial of cases. And note taking by jurors. If you like to take notes during the trial, you may do so. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you do not want to. That will be left up to you individually. You will be provided with a notepad and pen for use if you wish to take notes. Any notes that you take will be for your own personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During recesses, the bailiff will take possession of your notes and will return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your deliberations, the bailiff will deliver your notes to you, and then they will be destroyed. No one will ever read your notes. If you take notes, do not get so involved in note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. Your notes should only be used as an aid to your memory. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's memory of the evidence. And as I said, the lawyers have an opportunity to make opening statements. The state goes first for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen, in the early morning hours, Saturday, June 25th, 2022, while most of Homestead was asleep, a single gunshot echoed through a quiet neighborhood. One shot. That's all it took. That's all it took to end a man's life. One pull of the trigger, and a father, a partner, a human being, was left bleeding in an alleyway while the person he shared a home with stood just steps away. Before this happened, you're going to get to learn a little bit about the relationship between the defendant, Daisy Lane, and the victim, Pedro Jimenez, as well as what happened leading up to that moment. The evidence is going to show you that the two of them, they've been together for 9 years. It was on and off, but in fact, they had 2 children together. And you're going to learn it was an unhealthy relationship. But even though it was an unhealthy relationship, they all lived together as a family. But you're going to see Mr. Jimenez, he wasn't always home. And why is that? Well, he was a truck driver. He was down the road. And just like in any relationship, it wasn't perfect. It had its problems. There were arguments, anger, and even jealousy. So, on Friday, June 24th of 2022, while being back in town from work, Mr. Jimenez began to have suspicions that his partner was cheating on him. So, he decided to ask and see whether or not that was true. The defendant ends up denying it. They go on about their day. They continue to act as if them. In fact, you can see surveillance footage of them that night coming back together to the home as a family, together with the children. Now, the video later on that night, that's when the murder occurs. But as that night progresses, Mr. Jimenez can't stand the fact that potentially his partner is cheating on him. So what does he do? He decides to go over to a friend's home. And while he's there at that friend's home, you're going to hear from the medical examiner. He was drinking, he was smoking weed, and he had cocaine in his system. But while he was there, who shows up to pick him up? The defendant. And she comes to that home and demands that he leaves there and comes back home with her. So he complies. He goes back home with her. Now, the night progresses. It's Saturday, June 25th. And you're going to find out that Mr. Jimenez and the defendant, they decide to step outside of the home and to go into the porch. Miss Lane, she wanted to smoke a cigarette. But interesting enough, she brought out a firearm with her. While the two of them were outside, the evidence is going to show you. In fact, Miss Link tells police officers that when she saw Mr. Jimenez out there, he had a look of betrayal. So she told him and confirmed that she had cheated on him. Now, Mr. Jimenez, rightfully upset, he doesn't pull out any weapons, he doesn't hit the defendant, but instead, he threatens her by telling her, "You're going to sleep outside tonight." He's going to lock the doors. And you're going to hear in evidence that this wasn't the first time that had occurred, and that she didn't like having to stay outside. So, in a fit of rage, she pulled out the gun, pointed it at the victim, and the facts will show that when the defendant pointed the gun at Mr. Jimenez, he had turned around and was running away in fear, and fear of Miss Link. The defendant then pulls the trigger and fires one shot. And the surveillance you see this week, it's going to confirm that. It's going to confirm that the victim was running away. You're going to hear the 911 calls. You're going to get to see the body on camera. And on that body on camera, you do see Mr. Jimenez take his last breath. This week, you're going to hear from several civilians. You're going to hear from officers. You're going to hear from homicide investigators and even CSI personnel. They're going to tell you about how this investigation led to that defendant. You're going to get to see the defendant's text messages. And you're going to be presented with evidence on how the defendant acted after the shooting, and how that behavior doesn't show or line up with self-defense. At the end of this trial, after all the evidence has been presented, the state is going to ask you to render a verdict that justice demands. Guilty. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Octala. Mr. Ross.
Good morning. So, yes, Pedro Jimenez and Daisy Link were in a long-term relationship together. They had 2 kids in common together, a boy and a girl. At the time of Mr. Jimenez's death, the boy was 7 years old, and the girl was 5 years old. As you heard from the state, they were together for a pretty long time, and you're probably going to hear there are going to be a lot of things that myself and the state don't agree on, but we can all agree that this a very toxic relationship. And in the days leading up to Mr. Jimenez's death, the relationship took a significant turn for the worst. What do I mean by that? 5 days before Mr. Jimenez's death, he showed up unannounced to Daisy Link's home. And to be clear, the evidence will show it was her home. He didn't live there anymore. He was removed from the lease. The locks were changed. He was not allowed in there unless he was specifically invited. And yes, he would be invited because they had kids together, and Miss Link was gracious enough to let him see those kids, even though he didn't have a right to be with them because he lost his parental rights to those kids. Now, he showed up unannounced 5 days before, and Miss Link had some guests in her home. She was in her home with her 2 kids, and she had her cousin with her cousin whose name is David, and he had his kids with him too. Mr. Jimenez showed up unannounced, and immediately he accused Miss Link of cheating on him, even though they weren't together anymore, cheating on him with this man who he saw in her house. Mr. Jimenez was informed, hey, I'm not cheating, that's my cousin, and I'm not sleeping with my cousin. He's just here because he's family. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Mr. Jimenez did not accept that explanation, and he physically attacked the cousin, David, and he physically attacked Miss Link. Now, when I say physically attacked, I'm not talking about a love attack. I mean, he grabbed her, he took a firearm, and he pistol whipped her with this firearm. He essentially split her head wide open. He left multiple lacerations on her head, and that caused spilling of a lot of blood. This blood's already dry, but you can imagine how much blood that was. He caused her to lose consciousness. I'm not just saying this, he very easily could have killed her. And he did it in front of his 2 kids. And he didn't stop until his 7-year-old son said, Bobby, please stop. Bobby, please stop. So at that point, as toxic as this relationship was, as I mentioned, it took a drastic turn for the worse. And that event, which happened 5 days prior to Mr. Jimenez's death, created a chain of events. And what is that chain of events? This is it. It's over. Daisy Link made a decision. Her family made a decision. Her family came from Texas, came down here for 2 reasons. One, to be with her, to take care of her after she had this unfortunate attack happen to her, and to prepare for her and the kids to leave the state. And that is what was going to happen. That's exactly what was going to happen. Now, did Miss Link do everything perfectly? No. With the benefit of hindsight, could things have been handled differently? Yes. Should Miss Link have decided to not have any contact with Mr. Jimenez from that point on? Yeah, she probably should have. And she did. She did have contact with him. And yes, you will see that on the day that Mr. Jimenez lost his life, she did pick him up and bring him. She brought him to see the kids because, as you will hear, she was going to leave and she wasn't coming back. And no, Mr. Jimenez did not live there. That was not his home at that point anymore because, as I mentioned, he wasn't on the lease anymore. The locks had been changed and he had just almost killed her a couple days before. So no. And what you will see that Mr. Jimenez, before the shooting, you'll see him running back and forth. You'll even see Miss Link come outside and yell at him, asking him to leave, and him running away. And you'll see on the video him coming back and forth, back and forth. And what you will also hear is that when this is happening right before he gets shot, You'll hear from the medical examiner that he was whacked out of his mind on cocaine. I'm not just talking about a little cocaine. You'll hear from the medical examiner. This man took so much cocaine that the cocaine alone could have killed him. That's how much cocaine he used. And the state told you that he was in fear for his life immediately before he got shot. Well, that's not what the evidence is going to show. And you're going to see it and you're going to hear it for yourself. Immediately before he got shot, he told Miss Link in a guttural, visceral scream, "I want to die. I'm ready to die." So she asked him to leave. She did everything she could to get him to leave. She did everything she could to get away from this man who, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to trample on anybody's grave, but the evidence will show this man was out of control. He was unhinged and he was dangerous. And she fired a shot to get him to go away from her, to go away from her home, which was locked, which she was not allowed inside of, where her kids were sleeping inside. She did not want him barricading himself in that home and doing something God knows what. We already know what he was capable of from just a couple of days before. So Miss Link gave him every opportunity to leave a place which was not his home. He did not have a right to be here. It was her home that she was protecting, which she had the right to do. He didn't have a right to be there. She did. She asked him to leave. She did everything possible. He screamed at her. He made it clear to her that I don't care what you do. I'm ready to die. I'm not doing anything. I'm going to do what I want. And that's when she fired. And she wasn't even firing trying to hurt him. She wasn't firing trying to kill him. She shot at the floor. And just so happens that this bullet, and this is going to be the strangest one-shot killing that you'll ever see. This bullet went up through his heel. And somehow it exited his foot and then went into his leg, and somehow that ended up killing him. So this was an extremely unusual trajectory from a bullet that you will see. So clearly she didn't intend to kill him, even though, and I will submit to you, the evidence will show she had every right and she was completely justified in using deadly force at that moment. And you will know that because later on, you're going to hear the instructions on the law from the judge, and those instructions will spell out to you, and you will see clearly that she was justified in her use of force in that specific situation. But she wasn't even trying to kill him. She wanted him to leave. She did everything she could to get him to leave before she fired that shot. And ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will show she fired that shot because she had no choice. And under this scenario and under those facts, that means she's not guilty, because it's not a crime to defend yourself when you have a reasonable fear of death or great bodily harm to yourself, to another, or from somebody committing a forcible felony against you imminently, which all those things she was in danger of in that minute. So when I come back at the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to find her not guilty, and that is the correct verdict. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. First witness.